Hi there, this is Luv Johar. Thank you so much for tuning into this video and thank you so much for watching this channel. If you have not subscribed already, the first thing that I want you to do that right now is to subscribe to this channel. A lot of important information is being shared in these videos. A lot of knowledgeable information which is coming out of experience is being shared here, guys. A lot of interaction is going on in these videos. A lot of Q&A is happening. So, in order to get the most out of it, only one thing is required from your side is to click on the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. That's the only thing required, nothing else. Okay. So, we are going on this series of videos in this workshop series of ISO 27001 successful implementation within any organization, guys. And in this series, we have come up to a level where we are talking about the most core and most critical concepts of the entire ISO 27001 implementation platform. Okay. The entire, implementation process, the most critical out of all the aspects is being discussed in these videos now, which is nothing but risk assessment, risk management, how to identify risk, who is a risk owner. All these things have already been discussed, guys, in the previous videos with examples, not one, not two, a lot of examples I have taken yesterday also. So if you have not watched those videos in the previous series, I would first of all highly request you to do that, so that if you have just stumbled upon this video in the search results, it will make more sense if you go back and watch from the first video itself. That will make most of the sense here, guys. Okay. So yesterday we discussed about a lot of important things. What is an asset? Who is an asset owner? Who is a risk owner? What is a threat? What is a vulnerability? And we also took a lot of examples. Okay. Today we will go ahead in the same series, and today we will discuss about how to identify the impact, how to give a scoring to the impact levels, how to give a scoring to the likelihood levels, and how to give a scoring to the risk level. These are the things that we will identify today, guys. Very important. Make sure you pay full attention. And all of those who are watching on the live stream, feel free to ask any questions, guys. The reason why I am doing this live is only because I want people to come to me and ask questions, guys. Whatever I am discussing today, if you have any questions, or whatever I have discussed so far, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat comment section while you are in the live video. That is the only purpose why we are doing live. Otherwise, I can have recorded sessions and I can, simply record the videos and, upload them on YouTube, but it will not bring a lot of value to you. So that is why I am doing it live. I want to get in an interaction where I can answer your questions, guys, which is the most important aspect of anything. Okay. So now today we will, yesterday we discussed about risk assessment. Today we will start about risk analysis and risk evaluation, guys, which is covered in clause 6.1.2. Today we will talk about risk analysis and risk evaluation, guys. Now, what is this risk analysis that we are talking about? For which risks do we have to do the analysis, guys? That is the question now. So the answer is analyzing the identified risks, whatever the risks that we have identified till now. Now we have to analyze them, guys. Okay. Now, what do you mean by that? When I say risk analysis, what do I mean by that? A lot of people get confused between these terms: risk identification, risk assessment, risk management, risk, analysis, risk treatment. All these terms are confusing, guys. Let's be practical. So that's why I am detailing them out one by one in all these separate videos and not combining them all together in one video itself, so that it makes more sense to you, so that it makes more sense to you, so that you understand what are these terms about, what are these jargons that you are not comfortable with, what exactly do they mean, and how can you familiarize yourself with them, and what are the things that you can do in order to make sure that you try to follow them appropriately, so that they are critical for your ISO 27001 successful implementation, guys. Implementation, I've already said, anybody can do. It's not a rocket science, guys. But how to implement ISO 27001 successfully is why we are sitting here, and is why all this is going about. Okay? We want to go for a successful implementation. We don't want to just implement it and get the job done. The purpose here is to get the most out of it. Okay? So, what are the steps that are included in risk analysis? That is the next question then. So, risk analysis includes the assessment of impact that the risk can have on the asset. Okay, so number one thing that risk analysis talks about is impact that the risk can have on that asset that we have identified. Okay, and at the same time, risk analysis talks about the assessment of likelihood that the identified risk can really happen. Okay, two important terms I have mentioned here, guys. One is impact and the other is likelihood. Two very important terms which you have to mention in the risk register as well, that we are talking to discuss next. Okay, so risk analysis involves the assessment of number one, impact that any risk can have on your asset, and number two, the assessment of likelihood that the identified risk can really happen. Now, what do I mean by that? Number one, the assessment of impact is very easy. I will discuss that with examples. Okay. And second is assessment of likelihood. Now, what is the likelihood of something, guys? Likelihood of something means that the probability of occurrence is called likelihood, guys. The probability of something to occur is the likelihood. That is the standard definition. So, likelihood means identified risk can really happen or not. That is defined by the likelihood. Like I took example yesterday, in a previous video, where I said that if your organization is surrounded by, a lot of, sea or coastal areas, then likelihood of floods in those areas are more. So that's where likelihood of a natural calamity like flood is more in those areas, rather than compared to any area which is far from the coastal side. So this is how you score the likelihood, guys. Okay, that's how it is scored. Now, what kind of impact can the risk have, guys? While we are talking about impact, guys, what kind of impact can a risk has on the asset? Three types of impact, guys. Three types of impacts are there. So, risk can have impact on the confidentiality of the asset. Number one. Second, impact the risk that can have is on the integrity of the asset. And the third impact is a risk that can have is on the availability of the information. These are the three different impacts. So whenever we talk about impact, what are the three things that we are looking for, which is also called the CI triad by a lot of people, which is the the main foundation pillars of information security, is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the three things that a risk can impact upon. Okay. Now, all this is theory. How we can understand this better with an example is the next thing now. So, example here is if a server goes down, then the information that the server is having is completely unavailable, guys. Now, what does this mean? This means that one of the core foundational, perspectives is lost here. The availability is lost. So, does it have a higher impact? Of course. Why? Because the availability of the information which was stored within that server was critical for your organization. So that's why if the availability is lost, then the impact is higher, guys. Try to understand this. Very important. Okay. So that's why it is important, guys. If the server is not available, you cannot access that information. That's why the impact is higher for that particular server. In this case, server is the asset, guys. In this case, the server is the asset for which we are discussing about. Okay. Similarly, if that same information or any other information is in a paper based form, is accessed by somebody, or any contractual papers or any important physical, tangible information is accessed by somebody who was not authorized to look at that, tangible information or paper based information, again, in this case, what is being lost here, guys? If unauthorized person accesses the paper based information, the information being an asset here, what is lost here, guys? Confidentiality is lost here, guys. There is no more confidentiality left of that information. So try to understand this, guys. Very important. So will the impact be higher in this case? Of course. Why? Because your confidentiality is at risk. The confidentiality is at risk. That is why impact is higher in this case. Out of 1 to 5, how much impact score you should give it? Maybe 4 to 5. 4 or 5 is the right number here, which people get struggled, about a lot. People keep on thinking what is the right number, whether we should give 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. Sometimes people give a rating from 1 to 10, then they keep on struggling. Sometimes people give a rating low, medium, high. A lot of ways, people do this. I have seen it happening in a number of ways, guys, in different organizations. There is no right or wrong way here. Try to understand this. There is no one particular set way of doing this. But the more important factor here to consider it, to do it properly and to do it correctly, guys. That is why we are discussing this today. That is why it is important, guys. Doing this and doing it properly and correctly is more important. Okay. So, as I've already mentioned, organizations can choose different scales for the impact assessment and the likelihood assessment. You can have different scales. You can have low, medium, high. You can have 1 to 10, 1 to 5, anything. Numerical values are there, anything. So it is for the organization to decide, which approach is more appropriate to them. And one important thing to consider here is all these decisions, all these informations that you are, the factors should be documented in the risk assessment methodology, guys. If you are giving it a scoring level of 1 to 5, it should be mentioned there that what does 1 means for your organization and what does 5 means for your organization. It should be clearly mentioned in the risk assessment methodology. Similarly, if you are following low, medium, high, then you should clearly establish the documentation around what does it means for a low impact, for a low likelihood, and what does it means for a high impact or a high likelihood, and what does it means for a medium impact and a medium likelihood. I hope you get my point. You should have all these ratings, You should have described them properly in the risk assessment procedure, the methodology where you are documenting it. There is a risk assessment document that you have to create, because of which we are discussing all this. That is where it all started, guys. If you go back previous to two videos, the first thing which I discussed about was risk assessment methodology, and it has to be documented. That's why we are discussing all this. Okay, so try to understand this. Now, what is the risk level, guys? The whole purpose of doing all this analysis is to get the risk level. What is the risk level, guys? A lot of people get confused around defining risk levels. They do not understand risk level. What is the risk level, guys? Okay. So, based upon the assessed impact and the assessed likelihood that you have done, the level of that particular risk will be determined, guys. Very important. Based upon your assessment of the impact and the likelihood, the level of that risk will be determined. How? That is the next question then. How does it happen? In some companies, in some organizations, the calculation happens like this. You know, they say that risk is equal to impact plus likelihood, and in some organizations, it happens in this way: risk is equal to impact into likelihood. Okay, so these are the two different ways. As I've already mentioned, there is no right or wrong way here, so do not think a lot about it. Okay, risk level, when you are defining it, you know can be impact plus likelihood or impact into likelihood. Now, what is an impact, what is an likelihood, we have already discussed in the previous 15 minutes of this video. If you are not sure, please go back and watch again so that it makes more sense to you. Okay, now whatever formula, whatever calculation that you choose out of these two calculations that I have given you, again must be documented in the risk assessment methodology document that you have created. It should be documented there. You should make sure you clear it out over there that you are using this formula in order to get to the risk level, okay, or this calculation. So evaluation of the information security risks is what we are discussing here right now. So what does this means? This means that the company has to decide which risks are acceptable and which are not. Yesterday we discussed about this as well. So while we are talking about risk analysis, and evaluation of the risk, you have to decide which risks are acceptable and which are not. Now, how to decide that is the next question. How do you decide which risks are acceptable and which are not? Depending upon your risk appetite, guys, which we already discussed. Depending upon your risk appetite, which we already discussed, you decide which risks are acceptable to your organization and which risks are not acceptable, guys. Very important. This is crucial information which you should know. This is as simple as it can get, which I am giving you right away. It cannot be more simplified than this. Okay? Make sure you understand this. Organization has to make a decision now which risks are acceptable and which risks are not acceptable, guys. So organization has to decide. Now, why it is important, guys, that you cannot accept all the risks or you cannot not accept all the risks? Why is it important that you have to accept certain risks and decide about the rest of the risks? Why is it so important? Why is it critical, guys? This is important because all the risks that are not accepted by you, must be treated in the next risk management step, which is nothing but the risk treatment. Try to understand this, guys. Very important. All the risks that are not accepted by your organization, they have to be treated. Treatment can be anything. Treatment can be applying controls. Treatment can be anything that we will discuss about. Risk treatment plan, risk treatment strategy. Treatment can be anything. But you have to understand this, guys. You cannot accept all the risks, or you cannot not accept all the risks. Okay. Some risks you have to understand and accept them. Now, which are the risks that organizations accept sometimes? Okay, we will discuss about that later. Okay, I do not want to jump over it, but yes, we will discuss about which are the risks that an organization should accept and which are the risks that an organization should not accept. We will also, detail out that so that it becomes crystal clear to you without any ambiguity what has to be done and what is done in the industry. Okay, that's why we are sitting here, guys. Otherwise no important otherwise there is no other discussion that is happening here. It's only about information security that is being discussed here, guys. Okay, so now whatever your impact or likelihood scores are, okay, as per them you define the risk level. Let's say the impact score is 4 and likelihood score is 2, and the risk level that you have calculation you have based on 4 plus 2. So in this case your risk level will be 6. Okay, so that's how it is defined. Okay, and the impact rating, which I have already mentioned before as well, is based upon nothing but the confidentiality, integrity and availability of that asset. It's very important, guys. If the availability of a particular asset is causing you issues running your business, then the impact rating should be higher. If non-availability of an information or a server or an infrastructure component or anything, that is causing an issue, then the impact rating should be higher. That's why we are doing all these, guys. That's why we are doing all these things, in order to understand the critical elements which are there in order to make sure that the business keeps on running. Okay, that is the whole reason. Now, a lot of people ask about likelihood ratings. This has come up in a lot of previous questions as well, that I had in these videos, which I keep on publishing. So, how to assess the likelihood? Let's say this is easier for organizations, for let's say example which I already took, which are residing on the coastal areas. They are more prone to floods. But what about organizations who do not have such criticalities? How to understand the likelihood in that case? Now, a lot of organizations, what they do is they follow historical data. Now, what do I mean by historical data? So historical data means you see the likelihood of such an incident happening in the previous years, whether any such incident has happened, or is there a high probability that that particular incident can happen. This is where historical data plays a crucial role. So you have to go back and understand this historical data, as well as if you are aware that there is something which is happening in the future which can cause and increase the likelihood of that particular incident to occur, or that risk to actually you know be there. So that's where you increase the likelihood rating, guys. So I'm sure it must be clear to you now how to give impact rating, how to give the likelihood rating. It should be pretty much clear to you by now. Okay. If it is still not clear, feel free to ask more questions, guys. Okay. Now, next thing comes in this case is risk treatment. We have talked about a lot of things. We have talked about a lot of analysis, assessment, but how to treat them is the risk treatment, which is clause number 6.1.3 that we are going to discuss next in the next video. We will discuss about risk treatment plan, how to treat the risk. All this we will discuss in the risk treatment process in the next video. But before I go, there is, when you calculate the risk level, guys, try to understand this. When you calculate the risk levels, there is an acceptable level of risk that your company can bear, which is called as risk appetite. Based upon that, you decide up to which level. Let's say the risk level is coming to 6 or 4 or 3 or 5 or 10, whatever. So you have to define a threshold there, based upon which risk level, based upon which certain threshold level that you have to decide for your organization. You are accepting all the risks below that level, and for certain threshold levels you will not at all accept those risks, and those risks will become unacceptable, guys. Okay, so that's where risk appetite comes into play. So let's say I have calculated 120 risks. Okay, and for those 120 risks, the risk level for 40 risks was less than 6, and for the remaining risks it was above 6. And for my organization, the risk appetite levels that I have set is, the threshold is 6 actually. So now it is pretty much clear for me and my organization which are the risks that we have accepted, which are the risks that are not accepted, which are the risks that we have to treat, which are the risks that we have accepted, and we do not have to do anything about that. I hope it makes more sense to you now. Okay. So I hope that this clears out a lot of doubts that people had around risk assessment, risk analysis, and a lot of people had been asking me to create videos on them. So now this is your video, guys. Watch it at least 2 to 3 times so that all this information makes sense. If you only watch it one time, it will not make any sense, guys, because all this is new information and your mind takes time to understand it. Okay, it will not be like you just watch one video and everything will be clear. No, you have to watch it multiple times. Only then it will make some sense. Okay, so this is all I wanted to discuss here today. And there are some questions that I can see from Naga. Thank you so much for posting in these questions. I am not discussing about SOC 2 right now, so I do not want to confuse people with SOC 2. So I would not be able to answer this question at this moment, but I will surely do that in the upcoming sections, Naga, because I'm sure that this is important for you. That's why you have raised this here. But since we are not talking about SOC 2 here, I do not want to hinder the flow. So I'll keep on continuing with the series so that it makes more sense for people. And of course, I'll answer this in this week, in this series, or any other video that I will create. There is already a video for SOC 2 that is there on this channel, Naga. If you want, I can give you the link on this description of this video itself, where you can find it out. SOC, we have created a lot of videos on this channel itself, so make sure that you go for SOC 2 from those videos. And still, if you think that you are not clear, let me know. Okay, so that it makes more sense. So this is what I wanted to discuss today, guys. I do not want it to be a 1 hour long session, so I'll end it here, and I will come back with the risk treatment plan with the next steps of the ISO 27001 implementation. Thank you so much for